Welcome to Red Hen Radio, a podcast brought to you by Red Hen Press. We're a nonprofit publisher fostering diverse stories every year. On this podcast, you'll get to hear from the people who are inside the literary world, the authors and publishing professionals who are working hard to keep independent literature thriving. Stay with us as we introduce you to today's segment.
Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to Red Hen Radio. I'm Monica Fernandez, Media Director at Red Hen, and I'm here today with some incredible guests to dive deeper into the world of book publicity. What's the best strategy to get attention for your book? Is social media necessary? How have things changed in the publishing industry when it comes to book reviews, listicles, and articles? We'll get to all of that and more with today's guests. I'm thrilled to welcome Kim Dower, who is not only a Red Hen Press poet and the former poet laureate of West Hollywood, but she's also been running her publicity firm, Kim-from-L.A, for over 40 years. I'm excited to get into how things might have changed over the last 4 decades. With Kim, we also have Ben Crisp from Studio Luce Books, a publicity firm whose work includes securing publicity for the book via podcasts, interviews, reviews, and more, managing and creating social media, as well as making unique content, including book trailers and author websites to grow exposure. Thank you both for joining us today. Let's get started with a little bit of an introduction. Tell the listeners a little bit about how you got started and what you do for the authors you work with. Let's start with you, Ben.
Yeah, it's lovely to be on there. Thanks for having me along. As you mentioned, at Studio List Books, it's helping authors with the publicity side of things, but also marketing. So across social media, websites, that kind of thing. But obviously these things today are very intertwined. I actually got started on it during the pandemic. I've always worked in marketing and communications and publicity in that world. My wife actually had a book coming out and it kind of got to the pub date and we were there and ready and we organized an online event because it was during the pandemic. And then we realized that there basically was not much happening from her press. And so I quickly took over editing her website, doing social media, launching like Instagram pages. And then I set up a podcast tour. And it was then that I started to realize that there was this gap and that, presses can only take on so much. Some presses like yourselves do more and others don't do as much. And it was trying to help and support authors who needed that support, especially in this ever-changing world. Digital publicity is growing. And I've just, been taking on more authors, working across the board mainly with indie presses, with Red Hen, some self-published, helping them where they need it.
Oh, my goodness. Well, Ben started doing this during the pandemic and probably is looking at a whole different profession from what I was looking at. I started Kim-from-L.A in 1985. So we are celebrating our 40th year of doing literary publicity for authors. And when I started, there were no computers. So, I have seen the whole change over many, many years from the days when we would sit on the floor putting press kits together, sending them in snail mail, getting on the phone. Our only communication was through snail mail and phone. I've seen the whole history sort of book publicity, which is interesting. I feel like we've lost a lot. We've gained some. It's a very different world. I mean, the ability to reach a couple of hundred people with a pitch in 5 minutes is extraordinary. But the loss of communication and special relationships with people where you would have on an index card who their partner is, who their children are, if they have children, what they like to eat, you could refer to this information when having a real conversation about a book. And you had the ability to change someone's mind. We've lost that ability for sort of the deep dive of pitching. The gain is the ability to reach a lot of people. Follow up is extraordinary. It can take 30 emails to even get someone to respond. Though it's faster in some ways, it's much more tedious in other ways.
That's so interesting. And we'll definitely talk a little bit more about how things have changed over the years. These days, many authors are seeking additional help in book publicity and marketing. It's such a world of mystery, and it's understandable that they'd want a guide through it all. How do you choose the authors that you end up working with? Are there any instances when you've had to turn anybody down?
For me personally, can I do the job The answer to that question has really changed, again, over the years. It's not about, do I love the book? Of course, it helps if you love a book, but you can love a book and also know, I will not be able to do anything for this person. You can not love a book and think, wow, there's all these publicity opportunities. So when someone hires me, they are hiring me to see what I think I can get for them publicity-wise. That's a matter of what the subject is, who the author is. It's much more important, sadly, doing book publicity, that the author has credentials and ability to really sell themselves and has other things to talk about just besides their book. So I look at the whole picture. What do I really think I can get for that person? Sometimes loving the book tips it over to the yes column, and not loving the book will tip it over to the no. I have turned people away, when it's a subject matter I do not want to deal with. I've turned books away when I don't have time on my schedule. And I've turned books away when I've really thought, I don't think I'm going to get them what they want.
That was super interesting, Kim, because it's definitely super important, whoever's working on behalf of your book, to really align with the message that the book is trying to put out. It's a symbiotic relationship and it's a partnership.
The jiving and the feeling, that symbiotic relationship, it's really more about the person, or let's just say it's equal, the person and the book. You really have to feel like you're on the same page with this person, because there are a lot of people who just dream of what's going to happen if they hire a book publicist, and they have expectations that just hiring a book publicist means they're going to get everything they want. You're failing from the beginning.
And that's definitely something that we at Red Hen consider when we're considering taking authors on. We always try and meet with them beforehand and just lay out the land, make sure that everybody knows the process in getting published with Red Hen, the things that Red Hen does, and the things that we hope the author will help with. Ben, how do you choose the authors? And are there any instances where you've had to turn someone down?
Listening to Kim speak, I have a lot of crossover. I think maybe because I'm newer to this and I haven't been hardened, I try and take on some of those projects. I definitely am impacted by the book, and there are cases of taking on books that maybe aren't going to get the huge amount of publicity, or they're going to be harder to push. At the same time, I think, exactly as Kim said, setting those expectations I think is really important at the start, and understanding where the author is. You know, if they're with like a tiny indie press and they want to be in the New York Times, like, it's about having those kind of conversations and just saying, like, we can think about that, but really we're going to be more in this kind of bubble, and are you okay with that? And aligning before we start working is important. I have definitely said no to some clients. I had one person who pitched the book, which on its own was kind of interesting. And then I did a little Googling to understand more about them. And I saw very different political beliefs to me. And I was like, at the end of the day, as a publicist, you're trying to amplify this person. You're trying to amplify their voice. You're trying to amplify their book. And no part of me wanted to amplify what they were saying or what they stood for. And I didn't want to have any role in their success. In the same time, I love to take on books that I believe in. If they have like a social justice value that are like aligns with mine, or they're from a background that isn't traditionally favored in publishing, I love to find ways to support them. Even if it's in smaller ways, I try and adapt to the author or the poet. I'd love to help in whatever way I can, even if it's small. And if I believe in their book and or the message of their book or their poetry, and I want to get it out there, then I will try and make that work. As Kim was saying, it's hard. A lot of people come into it with really high expectations. They've written this book, they've done all of this crazy hard work to get this book to this moment. And then they almost want it to be like, right, let it fly. And that doesn't always happen, especially today. It's such a crowded market. So aligning on that is very important.
It definitely seems like we're all in agreement. And I think this sentiment kind of applies in any aspect of getting your book published. It really is just a matter of finding a support system. What's your favorite part about this job, and what's the hardest part about it?
I'm going to speak as also now as an author, because I'm a Red Hen Press author. Red Hen has published 6 of my collections. It's a lot of poetry. I think one of the hardest parts of my job is when I feel I've disappointed my clients. Publicity is just wanting to please and wanting to please and wanting to get things. And like, oh my God, I've got to get this for them so they'll like me. And, that was when I was very young. Now it's like, so they'll pay me. We went from like to pay. And now I feel it's so that they'll feel I never, ever, ever want someone to go out there in the world and say she didn't do what she said she was going to do. That to me is like the worst thing that could happen. If their expectations are extraordinary and unrealistic, I know I'm going to disappoint them. So no, thank you. So being disappointed also for me, because I've had 6 books out and I've worked with you, Monica, on 3 of those, I think. And there's going to be disappointments. You know, you thought so-and-so is going to review you and they don't. But I know what it's like to be out there in the cold. That helps me in a way because I can relate and understand what they're feeling. By the same token, you know, my favorite part of the job, the obvious answer is when I get something incredible for somebody, when I get NPR, when I get the New York Times, when I get some amazing whatever, and I can tell them about it. And it's so exciting to see in print. But really, what's always been the favorite part of my job, which I don't get to do that much anymore, is convince somebody to cover a book. You know, really feel that barrier, like they weren't interested little by little, like, no, just read this paragraph, just turn to this page, just infusing them with the enthusiasm that I had when I took the book on and watching a no turn into yes.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what was just said. Again, what you were saying about like writing myself, you kind of understand the process a bit more, or like what the publicity process, but also what it is like to be a writer. I think writing is amazing, but it's also a very lonely, vulnerable process. You're putting yourself out there, you're spending a lot of time alone. Then the book comes out. It's kind of one of the first times that your work is being seen and validated. When you get that review after pouring so many hours in, that moment of validation, I think everyone kind of strives towards. So when you can get that for someone, it's amazing because you know the struggle. I think every win, you know, is great if it's huge, like you say, with NPR and New York Times, but even if it's like a tiny thing as well, like all of those things accumulate and just support an author after the journey that they've been on. I don't want to let them down. You know, I want to do it right, especially because I love all of the authors I work with. So there's like that personal connection as well that comes in. A really hard part generally at the moment, there's just such an oversaturation in the market. You know, self-publishing is great, but there's just like so many books out there. You've got indie presses, you've got Big Five, you've got self-publishing. So many people are trying to get review space and places aren't doing reviews as much as they used to as well. This week, the International Booker is announced. I read a lot of those books and I was trying to read some reviews for some of those books. And these are all on the Booker shortlist. And some of them barely have any reviews anywhere. And yet they're up for the Booker today. And it's just a real struggle to get that airtime. But everyone wants that. Everyone wants reviews more than anything.
You're absolutely right, Ben. You're absolutely right. Everything you've just said about reviews, everyone wants them and they're the hardest thing to get. And people don't really understand why they're hard to get. And so you're juggling, trying to explain to an author or client why it's going to be difficult, but then you sound sort of like a downer or like you don't have faith in the book. It's a dance. The review does not translate into sales. Sometimes it does if it's a reviewer that people trust, that they read, but oftentimes the review doesn't. And I'll put one other thing into the mix. I have fought and worked so hard to get a certain reviewer to review a certain book. And it happens and it's a bad review. I learned from that time that it's like, whoa, be careful what you're like begging for. It could go against you in a way. It also might not get you what you want, which is sales. So it's we are in a tricky world here.
It could be more influential these days to get like 50 reviews on Goodreads or Amazon than it is to get like a major review. You want that bigger one, but it could be more effective in sales.
It seems like, especially now in the TikTok age, word of mouth is way better at getting sales than reviews in any kind of periodical. That's an example of how things have changed over the years. And with that, I will segue into my next question. I'd love to dive into how quickly things in the media change over time. In the media and marketing department at Red Hen, we're constantly having to adjust our strategies, redirect our focus, and somehow find our footing in the part of publishing that feels like a never-ending roller coaster of trends, topics, and strategies. Let's start with you, Kim. In the 40 years of Kim-from-L.A, how have things changed over the years, and how have you adapted?
Just as you're saying, the trends, topics, and strategies, those are the 3 words. Those are good words. That's what it's about. Things change, and as they change, we have to change with them. So it's all about what's in the news. And also what you said about word of mouth, that has not changed. It's always been word of mouth. And that's the point with the review. Like you can get a great review in the New York Times, but if no one's talking about that book, you have to be at the, getting your hair done or at the gym or walking in the park with a friend and the baby in the stroller, and someone has to say, oh my God, you've got to read this book. That's what happens. And now that can be amplified because of social media. You can take a book down, you can elevate a book. Social media is both a blessing and a curse. And okay, that's another subject. But how do we change our strategy? Here's what it is. Number one, breaking news and celebrities sort of are neck and neck. What's in the news at the moment and celebrities? That's always going to be the fact. It's been for 40 years. It will continue to be. So as publicists, we have to look at our list and see how does what we're handling tie into the immediacy of the news. Even if it's not about that topic, we have to be very aware. Oh, I have a thriller written by an ex-attorney who covered a serial killer. Well, there's a serial killer in the news. So celebrity and what's in the news. And then after that, it's what's trending. If you have a book on a health topic that's big in the news, a week ago, no one cared. And this week, so-and-so talks about it. And it's the biggest thing on TikTok. You're going to start making calls for that book. I'm sure Ben does the same thing, but we have to see what books we handle that have anything to do with what's going on in the world at that moment and how we can fit them in, how we can tie them in. And every day it changes. Every day it changes.
You have to keep your list just in your head all the time, because once a breaking news story happens, you have to immediately kind of think, okay, which of my books will fit in this one? We invite you to Red Hen's annual benefit gala for an exciting evening event filled with readings, a live auction, and a chance to meet Red Hen Press authors and members of the literary community. We hope you can join us in celebrating our 31st year on Sunday, October 26th. For more information, visit redhen.org/events/benefit or find the link in our show notes.
Years ago, I used to book The View a lot. You used to be able to get normal authors on that show, but there was a producer, and it cracked me up every time she said this to me. She goes, how does it affect my girls? How does it affect my girls? I once wrote that down and put it on my desk. If I'm pitching a book, how does it affect my girls? This is what people care about. How does it affect me? Why do I care about this book? Why does this book matter to anyone but you?
I think in that sense, I completely agree. And I think I found it easier to pitch nonfiction because obviously you've got that subject matter, you've got an expert on that subject matter. Whereas fiction, it's almost it's looking at a book and not selling the book exactly, but like what's inside this book, what is the theme of this book? What's this book really talking about? And then trying to link that in to the current moment. On the general question of like how it's changed, traditional book tours used to be the main thing. And whereas these days book tours still exist and they have value, but I feel like they're very much changing. They're no longer the events that they were. They can still have value in the sense that then linking that into this digital publicity world that we're in, it's like getting photos of the event and doing a post on Instagram and a collaborative post with the bookshop that hosted you and the author that also spoke there. The actual tour itself has changed so much. And so it's a bigger concentration on the online world and those like digital first strategies. Social media is constantly changing. There was a period where Facebook was the be all and end all, or then it was X and everyone was on Twitter. I personally love and think Instagram is a great tool for authors. I think a lot of book people are on Instagram. And so it's really collaborative in that sense. But that could change again. And all of these things are constantly shifting. We're in a very rapidly moving world. So you have to be on top of that. It's one of the reasons I really love email marketing and newsletters. Email is one that hasn't changed in the sense that email was here when the internet first opened up. Everyone uses email. Having an email newsletter list, I think, is a really important thing and one that you can take with you wherever you go. But you got to stay on top of these things, constantly shifting, especially online, and being adaptable to that, I think, is very important.
I think you just made my whole week or maybe year to hear that email is important. I have the oldest email in existence. I'm Kim-from-L.A. at Earthlink. besides that, I love knowing that email has been around since day one. That's right. And the other thing you said that I want to pick up on is about the book tour and then social media amplifying it. So I was doing this in the day where there would be, I'm not kidding you, 20 cities and author escorts, a person in St. Louis and Minneapolis and every city you can imagine who would pick the author up. And there would be 3 radio stations and 2 daily newspapers and 1 major television show. I mean, it was amazing. And this is how it worked. Okay. And now it's a sad little dwindling. You go to a store, and if 20 people show up, my God, the heavens have opened up for you. It's a struggle. But what you say about if you do go on that book tour, and you are reading, and if you do have pictures and put them online, it really looks like a huge deal. I still believe that, particularly for poets, if you go places and read your work and people get to know you, that's also what we want to do.
Someone else I was talking to, people have said, wow, your book tour was amazing. You know, they would go away for a weekend with their family, but then look up what bookshops were near where they were, I don't know, going on the road trip or whatever, contact them, do some book signings as well, and just make it part of like their normal life. And it made it seem like this grand book tour when it really wasn't. But there's ways to get your book out there, and without it becoming an all-consuming, terrifying, like, I've got to organize this and guarantee this many people there and all of these things that are hard to do today.
We all need to lower our expectations. I mean, this isn't what you tell like your children. Lowering expectations is not something you want to hear. We want high expectations. We want to deliver, but we also want to sleep through the night. We want to relax. It's not a bad thing to strive for.
Both of you are also authors. For the listeners, Kim's latest poetry collection, What She Wants, came out in January of 2025, and Ben's debut novel, And So I Took Their Eye, is out in July 2025 under his pen name, Ben C. Davies. Congratulations to both of you. When you are publicizing your own book, do you ever tap into the same contacts that you have for your clients, or do you prefer to try and keep things separate? And if you prefer to keep things separate, how do you do that?
Well, the way I keep things separate is I do not do publicity for poets. First of all, there's no money in it. Nothing against poetry. I'm a poet. I have 6 books out, but I just know, pretty much I'm realistic. Well, absolutely, I use my contacts. I use them intelligently. You don't send a book or an author to someone who would have no interest in it. I have years of relationships with people who trust that the people I send them are people they're going to want to talk to. So that when they say no to me, I say, no. You would love this person. I guarantee you will love this person. If I can't say that, I can't try to book it. So it's the same thing for me. I'm sending my book to people I think would like the subject matter of my poetry, or like to talk about the subject, or like the poems. As you know, Monica, I am not comfortable sending my book out for review. I feel like that is an area where I want my publisher to promote me, and you are successful in getting my book reviewed.
It's interesting you said about not taking on poets, and more by accident than design. I've realized the same thing. A lot of my clients aren't writing the same thing that I do, but I do have like a little crossover, and that's actually been really hard with one client where I've been like, I need to publicize my book. I'm doing my own publicity, but at the same time, I don't want to jeopardize publicizing their book, and what do I prioritize? And so going forward, I think, especially if I have like other books coming out, I'm definitely going to do something similar. There's contacts that I'm building up or have built up, and then I don't want to jeopardize that relationship by promoting myself. And so, like you say, it's about thinking very carefully about, is this book right for them? I'm not just going to send it out to everyone and just blitz it. I have to think more carefully with the clients and the relationships I built up. I'm a Brit. Self-promotion is very uncomfortable. I find it so much easier to pitch other people than to do it for myself and to advocate for myself and say, you've got to read my book. It's hard to just be like, you should read me. That's why I want to be careful with who I pitch it to and how I do it.
Yeah, it's really hard, Ben. It's really, really hard. And I'm not a Brit, I'm just a brazen American, but I still find it difficult to say, you must read me. And believe me, I would never say that. And my first book, 16 years ago, a lot of my contacts were actually delighted they didn't even know I was a poet. I never spoke about being a poet. I never talked about that because to me, it's like when you're in LA, your waitress or waiter is always going to be an actor or an actor. All you want is for them to take your order. You don't want to hear about the play they're in. For that first book, no one even knew I was a poet. Now that was kind of good publicity wise, because I could say, hey, you've known me for 20 years. I've been pitching these books, but I also do this. And so they were delighted with that. But as the years go on and the books go on, it only gets more difficult for me. And it took until like the third or fourth book to join the publicist and the poet.
Well, as Monica mentioned, like I write under a pen name. I created a kind of a separation between the two worlds, but they're merging more and more the longer I go on. And I think I want to pull them together. We also run this writing residency down in Guatemala, and there I use my author name. So I've kind of blurred everything now completely. So I feel like I like them all being part of the same world. And I'm glad that you say that you do that, because I think it's part of who you are as a writer, is also supporting other writers, and bringing that together is important.
Since we've been discussing both of your experiences as authors trying to promote your own books, what advice do you have for authors or writers who don't even have a book out? What would you tell them to kind of get their work out or get their name out a little bit more effectively?
Right now, we have so many opportunities for poetry. I don't know about fiction. I do know about poetry. I mean, there's so many journals, hundreds of them, that you can submit online constantly. What I say is get your work out. Well, how do we do that? Well, there's a million opportunities to get your work out. First of all, read, read, read. We've all heard this as advice we've gotten since, kindergarten. Read, 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 read other poets, see what's going on. Develop your ear, develop your voice, keep writing, keep working it. And then when you feel a poem is ready, even if you don't feel it's ready, send it out. Typing online, journals that accept poems, you'll fall off your chair. And then there's, Poets and Writers magazine, which comes out every 2 months. And in the back of the issues, there's the contests, all the contests, all the journals to submit to. They even have a calendar that you can rip out and put on your bulletin board or your desk or wherever. And it tells you who is accepting what and when the deadline is and all of this. And try to get into a community of other writers. I, for 12 years, went to Terry Wolverton's writing workshop every Saturday called, Writers at Work. Every Saturday, I was with a group of people. I could read poems, read their poems. We talk about them. Find a community. Every city has poets, workshops, and be part of it. Declare yourself a poet. Declare yourself a writer. You don't have to get paid to be that person. You just have to be doing that.
I completely agree. Like the community thing, I think, is really important. About half a year ago, I joined one. I'm up near San Francisco, but I joined one here. It's just opened so many doors, not in a transactional kind of tit for tat relationship where it's like, I'll do this for you, so you do this for me. But it's just being part of a community and making those connections. And then next thing you know, you go and support someone when they're doing a reading. And then maybe down the line, you have a book at a similar time and they will blurb your book. Being around people who are going through the same journey as you helps in just so many infinite ways, I think. Not just in marketing your book and how you can improve marketing, but just in yourself as a writer, like you say, and sharing ideas and sharing notes and building yourself up. And I think that's really important, and trying to find that community wherever it is, I would recommend to everyone. I think in terms of marketing more directly, if you don't want a publicist, I think authors need to treat it seriously, like treat it like a job. Success of your book is not just going to happen by getting a book out there anymore. Maybe one in a million, but really you have to be focused. You have to be organized, create spreadsheets, track what you're doing, who you're reaching out to, educate yourself, read books about publicity, expect rejection. Don't get hurt by any rejection that you get or those unanswered emails. This is, again, part of it. You just need to put yourself out there and set expectations and what is realistic with your book and really work hard at it. For marketing today, build an author platform, simple things. If you don't have a website, have an author website, get your name on the internet, SEO, all of that stuff, social media. Even if your book's coming out in a year, even if you haven't got an agent or haven't got a book contract, still set up that website. Make yourself look as professional as possible. as legitimate as possible, support other writers on social media and in person, build all of these things up, read other writers and say, like, I read this book, it's incredible. Support them in that way. Maybe that would help you in the future, maybe it won't, but it's all about that shared community, as you said. You know, it's a lonely job. So find other people that will help you along the way.
I love everything you say. And I'm going to add something that we haven't discussed. I used to say to people, go to the bookstore and find books that are like yours, or look online. Now, I guess it's easy, but what else is out there? What makes your book different?
Mhm.
What makes your voice as a writer different? Compare and contrast. My book is like this, but it's different because of this. You know, it's like in the movie business. When you're pitching a movie, comparing, it's this with a little this. And the same thing we should know as writers and publicists, what we're selling, what we're writing, how it's the same and how it's different. Pitch to the people who will want it. Read the room of being a writer and being a publicist. Listen to the radio, listen to podcasts. Know it's out there, because we're like hitting our head against the wall trying to get stuff. And we hope you've heard of it.
So before we wrap up, I wanted to celebrate both of your work. So what is something you achieved for your clients or for yourself that you are most proud of?
I guess from a very personal level, when my wife's book came out, and then I kind of took over the publicity of that. And then it, you know, we could have done better. We was, instead of starting 6 months before or 3 months before the book came out, we were literally starting a week before or even a few days before. But
Let's start
getting
with you
some
then.
success for that felt like a real win. And also it started me on this journey, and I love what I do now. I love working in this world. I love working with books. And so that feels like a success. As time goes on, it changes. The little stories are sometimes as good as the big ones. I work with a self-published, well, his book's not out yet. He's written it. His idea, which I do recommend, was to build up his marketing and online platform before he pitched to agents. And so he really has gone hard on that. He did a retelling of Candide by Voltaire as the book. And I made like a book trailer for this book. He blitzed it across social media. He got like a really positive response for this book that hasn't got an agent, hasn't got a publisher, nothing. But there was loads of people who were commenting saying, this looks great. I can't wait to read this. You know, it gives the confidence to be like, yeah, I'm an author. I am a writer. I want to own that. And then now I'm going to go out there and pitch. As I said, every win feels like a win. It's great when it's in like a good publication, when there's a review, when an author gets that validation, but also it can come from the smallest places.
Yeah, I've worked with literally hundreds and hundreds of authors over the years. In general, I have best-selling authors who come to me already as bestsellers. And I'm thrilled what I can do for them, but I'm just doing the job that a lot of other people could be doing. I think that when I had over many years authors who were nobodies, first books and nothing, even before social platforms existed, and I could lift them up and get them up that ladder. And I worked with them on their first, second, third, fourth books and see their careers and feel like I really had a part in that. Of course, it's their writing and it's them, but I could say, if not for me, that wouldn't have happened. And that's very, very satisfying. For my own book, the reviews that I've gotten by some wonderful people, including the Washington Post, I just, almost passed out with joy. But I didn't do that for myself. I think you sent the book to the Washington Post. We didn't know what was going to happen. The surprises that we get that I had nothing to do with have been the most joyful. And the most joyful thing for me, and I don't remember which collection it was, but when Garrison Keillor still did the Writer's Almanac, luckily, he picked about 12 of my poems over the many years. And the first time I heard him read a poem from my first book in 2010, I was in shock hearing this man read my poem on the Writer's Almanac. And the greatest joy for me was once he did a poem of mine called Bottled Water. And it's a poem about, you go to the store, you try to choose, there's so many bottled waters, and the speaker in the poem just starts thinking about her mother. Should she go into a nursing home or should she keep her in the house? And while she's choosing the waters, and Garrison Keillor read the poem Bottled Water. And the next day I got an email from a teacher, an AP teacher in Michigan with an 8th grade honors English class. And I want to tell you something. I cried reading this email because My class we listened to Garrison Keillor every day, and we heard your poem, and there was a big fight in the class. Was your poem supposed to be funny, or was it supposed to be sad, or was it ironic? And could we talk to you about this poem? And I did a phone call with the class, and each person got up and told what their feeling was. These 13-year-olds. And that to me was the pinnacle of my success as a poet.
That's beautiful. Also, great teacher. Love that teacher's doing that.
Amazing. Well, this was such an incredible conversation. Thank you both so much for taking the time to share your insights and advice so generously. Navigating the world of book publicity can be so daunting and intimidating, but it's always easier with a little help and guidance. Thanks for listening to this episode of Red Hen Radio. Kim Dower's latest poetry collection, What She Wants, is available now wherever books are sold, and be sure to order Ben's debut novel, And So I Took Their Eye Out, while you're at it. To learn more about Kim-from-L.A. and Studio Luce Books, visit kimdowerpoetry.com or studiolucebooks.com. Happy reading, and see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Red Hen Radio, the podcast where independent literature takes flight. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Join us once a month for an in-depth look into publishing as we share interviews, resources, and advice for readers and writers. Keep up to date by subscribing to the Red Hen Radio podcast on your favorite listening platform. Join us on Substack for a detailed feature of our episodes, plus additional resources. Follow us on social media at Red Hen Press to stay updated on our newest episodes, latest books, industry news, and literary events. This program is brought to you by Red Hen Press, Inc., a nonprofit publisher of diverse stories. Interviews are unscripted and are edited for clarity. The views of guests do not necessarily reflect the views of Red Hen Press or its staff. Special thank you to our supporters who have generously contributed to the making of this podcast. We couldn't do this without you. Thank you as well to our Red Hen podcasting team, Samantha Diaz on media and marketing, Piper Gorley on sound editing, and Kate Gale and Toby Harper-Petrie on the mic. Tremendous thank yous to our special guests for their generosity of time and wisdom. For more information, find us at redhenpress.com. In the meantime, keep reading, keep writing, and keep dreaming. Talk to you soon.